Welcome to episode 201 of KT Confidential, the real estate podcast. Today, Adrian and I discuss what to look for in a home inspection. Hope you enjoy. Hey, buddy.
Is that the start?
That's the start. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Today, talking about what to look for in a home inspection. Pretty relevant right now.
Very appropriate. It's been, aside from recently, when was the last time it's been near a year, I would say.
Oh, so I know this exact answer.
Okay.
Because I just completed a home inspection last week for our wonderful Jennifer.
Yeah.
The last home inspection I did was actually for a client that you were helping to purchase. I think I ended up doing the deal because you were away or something. And it was for a home in Dundas. And it was almost 2.5 years ago.
Oh, I know which one you're talking about. That's crazy.
That was the last home inspection that I was a part of.
So for those of the people watching or listening, the reason we've not done home inspections is because you basically couldn't. There was so much competition.
Always recommend it.
Oh, of course we recommend it. I mean, I would do it personally if given the opportunity. But when the market is so hot, sellers just were not accepting offers where there was a condition of any kind,
Right.
let alone a home inspection.
If you wanted to get the home, you had to go in as firm as you could.
Yeah, well, and when you have a home inspection, the seller's risk is that they put their home into a conditional status, during which time most buyers are not looking at the house. They assume it's going to firm up. They're not considering it. They don't want to get excited about it, so they look at other homes. So you're missing opportunities.
A lot of agents don't even want to.
A lot of agents won't even.
Right.
Yeah,
They'll say, oh, it's sold conditional. Let's
Yes.
wait and see what happens with it.
Exactly. And it is, whether it's a home inspection or a mortgage approval, there in any condition is a reason for a buyer with cold feet to get out. If somebody wants to get out of the deal,
Depends
they're going
how the clause is written, but most of the clauses will, it's potentially a walking stick for the buyers, right? Because a lot of them will say at the buyer's sole and absolute discretion.
Right. How do you argue with that?
You can't.
Exactly.
Legally, you cannot. There is no gray area. It's at their sole and absolute. That word absolute.
Unless you had, perhaps there's a case where you had an absolutely perfect home inspection, which doesn't happen. There's always something. But if you had a perfect home inspection.
Never happens.
Right. But if it did, maybe they'd have a case.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But even something as small as, oh, we thought the windows were 2020. They're actually 2019.
Right.
Absolute discretion.
Yeah.
So in a court, there is no gray area with that.
Right. So what are home inspectors looking at? What are you looking for during a home inspection? And also we should talk about how do you handle issues. So if you have a deficiency in a house, what are the different ways you can handle it? What are realistic expectations?
So backtracking a bit, a home inspector in the province of Ontario is not required to be licensed yet.
Right. There are certifications they can get.
I was just going to say
they're not governed.
They're not governed. So 2-3 day course, you can get a certification. A lot of home inspectors have contract experience, like they were contractors or they were builders, or, you see a lot of transition from the blue collar industry into
the home
inspector world.
Yeah.
And there's different kinds of inspections, right? Like you've got well inspection, septic inspections.
They're all very separate, different areas of expertise.
But a typical home inspection for...
Am I making noise over here? It's my chair rubbing on the leg. I can't help it. I'm trying to adjust the feet so they're not touching the leg of the chair.
I'll move over.
Save it for after.
Yeah. Well, the cameras are on.
I'll stop fidgeting.
Sorry. I'll hold a pen.
There you go.
I know.
Can we add that to the list of what we need to get in the media department? Some stress balls for
Pens work too,
fidget
but they're noisy
spinners
when
will
you
make
drop them.
noise.
So
a typical home inspection, let's say on a 2,000 square foot home, you're looking, depending on the type of inspector, about $500 is reasonable to budget for.
Yeah.
It
The
should
size and the age of the house are usually the variables that determine it.
right, and 2 hours, 2.5 hours, something along those lines.
Could be more.
Could be more, could be less, depending on the house.
And the inspector.
And
A lot of variables.
These guidelines are totally out of whack.
Yeah.
How do you hire a home inspector? What would you recommend?
Well, you could ask your realtor for a recommendation. Most agents will have, a few home inspectors they work with regularly. You could also revert to reputable brands, or you can simply go and do the research yourself. I mean, that's typically what I do if I want to hire somebody. You go look at local Facebook pages or forums, and you find conversation about these topics, or you just Google it. Look for Google reviews, whatever. It's not hard.
Yeah, there's a lot of reviews out there that should be able to guide you in the right direction.
Yeah, some people will bring in their, handyman parent,
Right.
or
my brother's a contractor.
I don't think those people are looking as thoroughly as a home inspector will. Like, home inspectors are very thorough with getting up into the attic, and so I wouldn't rely on your buddy that's a contractor.
Right. Well, those contractors probably specialize in one specific area, and maybe they have general knowledge on other things. So, a carpenter, as an example, that is into building custom homes may have insight into some of the components of the home, but in a thorough home inspection, you want a thorough inspection.
Well, they may not, if it's an older home that may have a higher possibility of containing materials that have asbestos, they may not be familiar with that stuff.
You could have asbestos, aluminum wiring, high-tech plumbing,
right.
Knob and tube wiring. Like, there's so many different components that creates a home which have changed so much over the years, right?
Yeah. And even having the right
materials.
Tools.
Yeah.
Like, carpenters probably not, and maybe, but they may not have the infrared camera, things like that, moisture meters. So
a drone.
Yeah. One thing that's interesting with home inspectors is I find as a realtor, it's really important to have home inspectors that know how to communicate, because in many cases there may be an issue that arises in the house, and somebody that has no personal skills, they're not personable, they just don't know how to communicate, they can turn something small into something big, scare somebody off, and then that buyer misses an opportunity to buy something because they get completely turned off where it was potentially an easy thing to remedy.
Yeah. You could have the opposite as well, where a home inspector, if, depending on your realtor, if a home inspector and a realtor have been working closely together for a long time, the home inspector might want to preserve that relationship and not screw up the deal for that realtor. So potentially there is something big and they make it out to be smaller than what it actually is.
Yeah.
To not, break that deal. So you really got to do your we always talk about doing your proper due diligence and hiring the right realtor. And an important component to that is the realtor's network, right? Like a good realtor is going to have a good home inspector, a good mortgage agent, a good lawyer, all at their disposal. So that goes kind of hand in hand.
Oh, completely. Like a sketchy realtor, questionable one, will have questionable mortgage brokers, right? Who forge documents.
You get what you pay for right across the board.
Yeah. So it all starts with, the process starts with the real estate agent. So if you find a really good, reputable agent, usually the people they're connecting you with are similar.
So the title of this podcast is what to look for in a home inspection. So obviously we are
Not that we're condoning doing it yourself.
We are not home inspectors, but we have been through many home inspections with many different inspectors and many different types of property. So you as a realtor, you're at the property with the home inspector, with the potential buyers. At the end of the inspection, what are the red flags that you are sitting down with your buyers and you're saying, this is, and I'll give you my examples from the inspection I did last week.
Okay. So I find, well, first of all, I think maybe twice in a decade has a home inspection revealed deficiencies that result in a deal falling apart.
Right. I've had one.
Yeah. It doesn't happen often. Usually everything's fine, or the problems are manageable, or you can come to an agreement of some sort with the seller if you need to, whether it's compensation or repair. I find the ones that are I would say the ones that are most important, just from being aware of perspective for new homeowners when they're moving in, like which things should we address to ensure there isn't problems down the road. What proactive repairs can we do? Outdoors, like caulking, grading, windows, like if you have wooden windows and wooden door frames, garage door frames, like painting those things if they're peeling because they'll rot, whatever. Those sort of proactive maintenance items can save you tons of money down the road.
Sure.
Inside, I'm a big fan of the attic, making sure you properly inspect that. Quite often we'll find bathroom fans that aren't connected, so the vents are venting into the attic, which causes excess moisture buildup, which can result or may have already resulted in mold, which people get scared as soon as they hear that word, but quite often that's relatively easy to remediate as well. But those are the big things, I think, foundation, structural, exterior, attic.
Yeah, so the inspection that I did last week revealed a lot of those maintenance issues. So I think it's important to understand as a buyer, when you do a home inspection, you obviously, or more likely than not, will have an agreement or a clause in your agreement, condition in your agreement. Again, going back to that sole and absolute discretion. So you have a period of 5 business days where you can bring a home inspector in, get a home inspection done, and then make a decision if you want to move forward or not. Generally, you have 3 options. 1, accept the home as it is. So the home inspector did their thing, told you what's right and wrong with the house, and you say, oh, that's good. We can live with all of this, and you sign off on that condition. Option number 2 is you walk away from the deal completely. We found stuff that we're not willing to accept. We don't want it remedied. We don't want the house anymore. You get your deposit back, you walk away. Option number 3 is you have the seller remedy, whether it's a deficiency, an issue of some kind, whatever.
Get it fixed, provide proof, have it done by a certain date.
Yes, depending on what it is. Or you renegotiate.
Which option do you typically resort to?
I don't.
Assuming you're not walking away.
Yeah. I've only had a deal that we've walked away once in the last 11 years.
Right.
And that was a mold issue. And the initial issue happened because of, like you said, the bathroom exhaust wasn't venting to the outside of the house. It was venting right into the attic. This specific buyer had 3 small children, and the attic, not only some of the insulation, but basically all of the wood in the attic
Right.
had black mold.
Yeah.
Because the fan had been pumping in the steamy shower steam into that attic for years.
Well, and that can be even the severeness of that can be elevated if all the soffits are covered with insulation. So you get lack of airflow.
If there's no airflow,
Yeah.
makes it even worse. Excuse me. So that's the only one I've had somebody walk away from. If you're looking at the other two options, do I renegotiate the price or the terms, or do we have the seller remedy? I always lean towards negotiate the price and the terms. Reason being, even if you create a clause in that agreement that says the seller agrees to, I don't know, hire XYZ company and repair XYZ problem no later than January 1st, and will provide a copy of the paid invoice to the buyer and buyer representatives no later than December 15th. Even if you write in that clause and have an amendment, so you remove your home inspection condition if they accept this new clause, it's leaving it in the hands of somebody else.
Right. Well, most sellers aren't going to opt for the higher quality solution. They're going to opt for the most feasible financially.
What a lot of mistakes that realtors make is when they insert that clause for the seller to repair something, it's so vague that it just leaves too much up for interpretation as to who's going to do the job, how's it going to be done. And let's face it, even if you hire a reputable company to do something, usually those companies will have more than one way that they can get the job done, the easy and cheap way or the expensive and timely way, right? Especially if you get into things like painting or even plumbing, the type of materials that are used can be different. So I always like to negotiate the price, and who doesn't love to get a home for less money, and then leave it to the buyer to complete those tasks now that they know exactly what's wrong, and they can ensure that it's done right.
Well, and the only exception for me would be if there's things where the quality doesn't really matter. Because it's just maybe a service more than, like pumping out a septic system. Like, I'd like it pumped out before I move in and provide proof.
Correct.
Or something that's weather dependent, closing the pool or maintenance to a pool. Like those things, you may not have much of an option.
That does happen, especially if there's water penetration issues or grading issues. And let's say you have a longer closing, like you have a 90, 120 day closing. You might not want to wait because it's leaving the home susceptible to potential problems.
Yeah. Well, and you can negotiate anything. So you could even negotiate that the person has it, the seller has something repaired by a specific company. Correct. Right? Maybe you could get them to agree to use your preferred company.
I do that all the time with pools.
Yes.
Especially if the pools are closed.
To open it?
Yes, right. Who's opening the pool, or if there is something wrong with the pool, who's repairing it, who's closing the pool. If you buy a home with a pool in September, the pool is still open, but if you're closing in November, December, the pool is closed.
Yeah, well, you need to be dealing with those matters. I've had instances where we bought a pool, but bought a house rather with a pool. They weren't moving in until the winter. And the homeowner typically would close it on their own, but our buyers wanted the peace of mind knowing that a company closed it, and then that once it came spring, they could use the same company who is now familiar with that pool to open it.
Yes. We have talked about pools and pool holdback clauses.
We're not getting that's off topic. That's off topic.
No, but I'm just saying in previous podcasts we have talked about that.
Yes.
So if that's something of interest to those of you listening or watching, 200 episodes of great content that you can learn lots about real estate.
Something important about pools, though, as it relates to home inspections and what they'll look for is they won't do a thorough inspection on a pool. That's a separate thing. But they will look at things such as advising about the...
You're talking about a typical home inspector.
Typical home inspection, what to
Right.
look for, yeah. So a home inspector will often give you advice on the condition of the surrounding area of a pool, like the grading or
Right.
degrading concrete, stuff like that, as it may affect the pool. But if you're concerned about the condition of a pool, you can get separate
or the pool equipment.
you can get separate inspections for that stuff, which is a good idea because
For sure.
a new heater might cost you $5,000.
Yep.
If you're not budgeting for that, it's good to know what condition it's in.
100%. So last week had a home inspection. Home is 50 odd years old. And it was an estate sale. So nobody living in the home. It's vacant.
Right. So probably no warranties, all that fun stuff.
The owner that owned it passed away, was old, passed away due to just being old.
Natural causes.
Natural old person
Okay.
died. So sometimes you see that and you think, all right, this person was whatever, 85 years old. There may be maintenance issues because they don't have the capacity or the time or the money or whatever to necessarily be on top of everything, right?
They certainly weren't up in the attic recently.
Correct.
Yeah.
So when you go into a property like that, you always assume, and I said to our buyers, we will find a lot of maintenance stuff, and our home inspector is certainly going to find a lot of issues. So there are things that you expect. So caulking missing around.
Well, the other part of that
exterior
too is the people handling the estate probably have zero knowledge about the condition of the home.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. Not only do they not know what's wrong, they probably assume there's stuff wrong. They're probably afraid that there's more stuff that they don't know. And they probably don't want to deal with all of that crap.
Yeah, so you need to be very thorough.
Yeah. And you all automatically will know, in this scenario, I automatically knew we might be able to negotiate something just based on that knowledge of us knowing it's an estate sale, nobody's living in there, it's vacant, don't know what's been maintained and not maintained over the years. And the executors probably just want to move on with life and get the deal done if the deal was structured
well,
right
and
to
that
begin
their
with.
response to anything will probably be like, "Oh, geez, well, I didn't realize that was a problem," and now it's a reasonable request versus, a homeowner.
If you have it home
a
home inspection.
A homeowner may be able to build a story around it or justify
Right.
something. But
So in this case, the windows are still in good shape, but they're old. We knew that because the windows have a date stamp on it. Furnace and AC, we assumed because the AC looked like it was 30 years old, which it probably is. But then you get into, more detailed stuff. Like there was some aluminum wiring that hadn't been pigtailed and the proper receptacles and switches were not installed. So now there's a cost of bringing in an electrician and potentially getting an ESA certificate for insurance purposes. The bathroom fan, again, some of these older homes.
that was at that house?
Yes, it wasn't Oh, no, it wasn't the mold house.
Oh, no, this was the recent inspection you did.
Yes.
It's very common.
The bathroom fan, not only was it not working, it wasn't venting to anything.
Yeah.
So it was just venting into the attic, and luckily no mold or moisture issues. So they probably weren't creating too much steam in the bathroom. So luckily we didn't have to deal with that. But you get a laundry list of all these things and it all adds up, right? Especially if you're not that handy or you want to bring in a pro. You got $200 here, $300 there, $500 here. So it all adds up. So the nice thing about having this inspection is the inspectors will give you a summary. And in that summary, with a knowledgeable realtor that has experience, you'll be able to ballpark. Okay, this will cost you about $500 if you're going to bring somebody in to do it, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. It's also good to keep in mind that, there's things that should be done immediately for safety reasons. There's things that are want to do, not so much need to do. But it's also realistic to think that the homeowner, had they not have sold, could have lived there for another 10 years without doing any of it.
A lot of times, yes.
So, unless you are, go in open-minded is all I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to go let Ruben in.
He'll go around the front.
It's probably locked.
That's where he's going, probably.
Oh, yeah, I think Jen came in.
Oh, did she? Okay. They're hoping to get him on camera.
So what do I look for specifically?
What do you look for specifically? So I should have asked you that.
Well, you kind of did, and I kind of had a roundabout discussion, but I look for things that we can negotiate. It's that simple. The home inspector will provide enough due diligence to the buyer that the buyer can make an informed decision whether or not they want to move forward. If the answer is yes, we want to move forward, the first thing that I look at is there anything that we can negotiate? I'm trying to save my buyers as much money as possible.
Of course.
So you got to think how the deal was structured and is there wiggle room?
Well, and for those things, it's often things, are there any items that were not blatantly obvious?
Yes.
Right? Like, can I find something that the other agent probably didn't know about either? Like, oh, the fridge water dispenser is broken. Or, something subtle, but it needs repair that nobody knew about.
If you walk up to the house and it's missing the front step and you got to leap 3 feet to get into the front door.
Right.
Don't try and use that as a negotiation tactic because you knew that when you presented the offer.
Exactly.
If something comes up,
that was a good post. Just trying to help with time stamping, whatever time that is.
Right.
It's already logged.
Awesome.
Now, if something like mold in an attic, well, you didn't bring your ladder to the showing and pop your head up into the attic to check it.
In most cases, the owners have no idea.
Right.
And they're usually cooperative. Like, I need to fix this now.
Holy crap, there's mold in my attic?
Yeah.
I don't want to live here either.
Yeah.
And then you also have to be careful. What I have found over the years is there are sellers that are shady too and try and cover stuff up.
Yeah. I've had clients kind of beat around the bush about a problem, like not want to disclose it.
Right.
Obviously we advise them you can't do that. If you know about it, you have to disclose it or repair it, get it fixed so that it is no longer an issue. So yeah, a lot of that happening.
Yeah. Well, even with this estate sale, nothing was disclosed in the listing, and I called the listing agent and I said, did somebody die on this property?
Right.
And he didn't know. He had to go back to the executors and found that, yes, there was a natural death that occurred.
Yeah, which you don't have to disclose.
Correct.
But to some people, it could persuade them one way or another on whether to offer or how to offer on the home. That sort of could give you a negotiating tactic to a degree.
Yes. And a stigma, while by definition, there is a definition to what a stigma is, but a stigma could be something different for different people.
It's left for interpretation.
Right. Yeah. You may not ever want to live in a home where somebody else died. I mean...
Right. If the current owner knows about it. Because it's realistic to think there's a lot of houses out there that have changed hands many times and maybe had a few deaths in it, right?
Yeah. You live somewhere on the Danforth in a 200-year-old semi-detached home. It's for sure somebody died in there.
Yeah.
Good chance anyway.
Oh, another thing about sketchy sellers and home inspections is... And we always advise our clients about this because people store things in their basement if it's unfinished quite often.
Yes.
During the listing period, is avoid packing things against walls.
Yes.
So that people can see what's behind there. Don't try to hide cracks,
Right.
because a crack may not be an issue, but if they find it afterwards during a home inspection and it looks like you were trying to hide it, then it becomes an issue.
Correct.
You know, how, to what extent is that crack? Is it leaking? Da, 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 da. So try to make everything very accessible.
Yes. Yeah. If you, obviously, you can't inspect what you can't see. So,
I like that. We'll
Right.
end on that.
all right. Well,
Get a home inspection
Get
if
a-
you can.
yeah, hopefully this gave you all a few tips. Leave your comments below. Thank you for listening and watching episode 201 of KT Confidential, the real estate podcast. Leave your comments. Make sure you like. We want to hear your feedback on this. Hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll see you next week.